It's Thursday, September 28th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show presented by NerdWallet. Oh boy, it's a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is the one and only Dalton Del Don. Dalton, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, man. Looking forward to talking football. Let's get right to it. There's a lot to go over today.
Yes, there's a lot to go over today because it's Stat Nerd Thursday. You know what that means. You know how we do it here. We give you one stat that you need to know for all 32 teams. If you prep your lineup, if you even just prep your viewing strategy for the NFL for any given week without listening to this podcast, honestly, you're an idiot. You're doing it wrong. So you need to listen to what we have to say. One stat for all 32 teams. We go in order of the standings, worst to best. That's their reward for being good. They get to get talked about at the end. Beautiful. We skip the Thursday night games for our preview at the end. We do this courtesy of Tankathon. Anyways, let's get right into it here. Number one, the Chicago Bears, Dalton. DJ Moore owns a 15.9% target share so far this season. That is tied with Cole Kmet for the team lead. It was honestly really tough to think of what to talk about with the Bears here, but I wanted to just do a brief check-in on DJ Moore, who's had a very volatile season. I would say that if you were bullish on DJ Moore, which I was not coming into the season just because I had volume concerns, overall offensive volume concerns. But now his own volume is a little bit problematic because this thing has been a bit spread out. I don't know. What is your temperature check on DJ Moore and this entire Bears offense right now?
Despite being high on Justin Fields' fantasy value, I was down on DJ Moore's. I did fear the volume. I mean, the target was worth half as much as one was worth last season for the Chargers, just because the Bears just don't pass as much. And I expected Justin Fields to take a step forward this year, more development. I didn't see it getting this bad, so I'm not claiming I saw this coming for DJ Moore. Can we talk about Fields? I have a lot of questions. Players saying, should we drop him? He had 7 design runs last week. The Chiefs are a pretty good defense with Chris Jones. The schedule eases up now. I think Fields is a buy low. I still ranked him top 10 this week against the Broncos defense. Just got annihilated against the run. But I'm open to you saying that I'm crazy and he's not going to be starting a month from now. Remember, Fields started really slow last season as well before he took off. And the running's going to be there. It's just so hard to not finish as a top 12 fantasy QB when you run like he's capable of.
Yeah, just over the next 4 weeks, Denver, Washington, Minnesota, Las Vegas, and then even the Chargers the week after that. So the next 5, I would say there's only one intimidating matchup in there, and that's Washington, which is a pretty good pass defense. They can get after you up front. I mean, yeah, people were calling Dalton like the Chargers-Vikings game last week, like a loser leaves town game. It's like, well, these two teams, you're already losers. So no need to call it a loser leave town game. It's basically just like, who's the biggest loser between the Broncos and the Bears? Look, if Fields can't do it in this game after that defense was just annihilated, like you said, and in such an embarrassing fashion. I mean, Vance Joseph, have you ever watched one game's worth of film on the Miami Dolphins defense or offense, and that was your plan on defense to stop that team? I have no idea. So I get it. I think I probably still ranked him maybe just outside the top 10 in quarterback rankings, but there's just so much wrong systemically with this team that it's tough for me to have any sort of ounce of enthusiasm. You've got 2 guys running the same route on a variety of plays. The spacing is off. The feel for the gameplay calling is off. They don't run the ball particularly well. They certainly don't throw the ball well. So that's where it's tough for me to get any sense of enthusiasm here.
Yeah, coordinators getting fired for weird reasons. It's not great in Chicago. I get it. It's looked really bad, but I just wouldn't be dropping. I know every fantasy league's different as far as depth, but I would not be dropping Justin Fields right now pretty much in any format.
Yeah, we could just bleed right into the Broncos stat here, too, because my stat for them was they've allowed 7.2 yards per play, easily the most in the NFL. And I know it's like, oh, that's obviously skewed by what we just saw against the Dolphins, but this has been a bad defense all year long. Like, they weren't good week 1 against the Raiders. They got ripped up there. They weren't good in week 2 either. Sam Howell, we'll talk about Sam Howell later. He looked great against this Broncos defense, and not so much in week 3. So I don't know. The Broncos team overall, it's a tough offense to figure out. Marvin Mims is their most explosive player. They don't play him. Their backfield's still a committee. And now their defense stinks. So this whole team has felt like an avoid for me basically like the last year and a half in fantasy, and it remains that way as well.
Yeah, how about Denver giving up 70 points, but having their spread increase against Chicago after that? Pretty wild how down these two teams are. What's up with Sean Payton, man? What a disaster. I mean, he's been previously just one of the best callers in the league. Now the footage coming out of him saying that Tua's going to get benched last year, and then he drops a 70 burger on him. He's not playing Marvin Mims, leaving Russell Wilson in a blowout, bringing in, he brought in Vance Joseph. Now he's sniping at reporters. It's gone pretty poorly so far for the Sean Payton era.
Yeah. Not great when you pitch yourself as like, I feel no sympathy for Sean Payton because he pitches himself as like this football czar. He basically is the sheriff in town in Denver. He slams the other coaching staff pretty unnecessarily. Says it's the worst coaching job in NFL history, and now you are top 3 in penalties, and you just allowed 70 points. Like, it's a bad look. You're right. It's not a good time for the Denver Broncos.
Play Mims more. Play Mims more. Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, number 3, third team here, Minnesota Vikings. The routes run here is really interesting. I got kind of full 4 stats here, but it's all the same thing. 1, Justin Jefferson has run the most routes in the NFL. KJ Osborne has run the 2nd most routes in the NFL. TJ Hawkinson has run the 8th most routes in the NFL. Jordan Addison is all the way down at 16th most routes run in the NFL among all pass catchers. This is just such like a passing warhorse right now. And it's funny because Dalton, there's kind of this like growing group, this growing ragtag band of people in the NFL and fantasy analysis, like wanting to get Kirk Cousins on the Jets to save their season. And I get it. We've got Garrett Wilson. We'd love to see something better happen with Garrett Wilson, but like, yo, this is such a good situation right now in Minnesota. Like, even just for pure fantasy purposes, let's keep Kirk in Minnesota.
Yeah, shame on me for not ranking Captain Kirk higher in fantasy, worrying about the lack of rushing yards. Who cares? Only the Chiefs have a higher pass rate over expectation. This is just a carnival for fantasy, as we like to say. Last year, Thielen had the 2nd most routes run, I believe, among all receivers. Jordan Addison's moving in the right direction. You look at his underlying usage each week, it's improved, but he was relying on the big splash plays earlier. But now it feels like he's confident you can start him as a wide receiver 3. What about regression hitting Minnesota hard all at once? They lost 3 fumbles all of last year, and I believe they lost their 8th of the year in the first quarter, 7th or 8th. They went 11-0 in one possession games last year and 0-3 to start this year. But it's great for fantasy. The Jefferson will start scoring more touchdowns, and Cousins. It looks like an awesome setup for fantasy. Jefferson left last week, looked like a possible serious injury. Thankfully, it was just cramps. Briefly, I'd like to mention Alexander Mattison. He's getting the work. Coming off a nice fantasy game, but he nearly lost 2 fumbles last week, had a bad red zone drop, and now Cam Akers enters the picture. So it might be a moment to try to trade him in fantasy after coming off a productive fantasy game.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible now that Cam Akers is in the mix, even though they traded him for like, a bag of footballs, basically, is what those draft pick swap was kind of equivalent to. It's clear they just had no interest in playing Ty Chandler. Madison's 2nd in the league in expected fantasy points. That role is just so good. And
you're right. Good. You're right. He doesn't have to be amazing.
But to the point is, if he even starts having a little bit of that sliced off when he's clearly not, the other guys that are up there are like Christian McCaffrey and Tony Pollard. Like he's obviously even Kenneth Walker is 5th. Like he's not even that level of talent. He might not even be as good as Miles Sanders, who's 5th. Kenneth Walker is 6th, Miles Sanders is 5th. He might not be as good as those guys. So like if we start shaving off to Cam Akers, we're really starting to lose fantasy appeal for Madison. And it's crazy because we're talking about like the regression with the fumble stuff. This guy had 2 fumbles his entire NFL career, and now it's like it's a consistent problem maybe in the back of his head here.
And last week, if you're looking at the box score, 1 wasn't counted, but forward progress was whistled like super early, and it looked like it could have. He definitely was fortunate on that play. But you're right, the role's great. If Akers is dust, then he doesn't have to be a great real life player for being very productive fantasy wise. Because man, that Vikings offense gets it done.
The only thing I'll say about Jordan Addison too, I don't want to like raise the alarm bells, but the guy is having legitimate struggles out there, like consistently getting open against press man coverage. And, he's a smaller player. These were issues that he dealt with at the collegiate level. And that doesn't mean he can't still be a productive guy, but like there might be a reason why they're not giving him a full workload here to start his career, because I think he's still growing out of that issue. And I'm not saying he's bad. I'm not saying that it's going to be an issue by the time we get to week 16, 17, 18, something like that. But I think there just might be a reason why they're bringing him on a little bit slow, even though he was a pretty refined guy coming out of college. All right, number 4 team here, Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton has a 43.5% pressure rate so far this year, but he has a 12.1% deep throw rate, and he's thrown just one ball away so far this season. Meanwhile, Bryce Young, pretty similar pressure rate, 42%, but just a 5.6% deep throw rate, and he has 9 throwaways on the season. Dalton, I really don't want to overreact here to what I saw in week 3, but I mean, am I crazy for thinking that this Panthers offense just ran a little bit more smoothly with Andy Dalton back there?
Way smoother. Andy Dalton, remember last year, put up really good on-target numbers. All the nerd stats, he was really actually pretty accurate last year, and he looked great. DJ Chark got the air yards after Jonathan Mingo was concussed. Adam Thielen, such a great DFS play last week. He was also tackled at the 1. I mean, he was close to putting up an even bigger stat line, and I expect him to be active again. I mean, even if he's not breaking a million tackles or separating out of the slot there with Andy Dalton, is a great rapport. I think Chark is possibly playable, but that's if Dalton remains starter in this matchup this week. If it's Bryce Young, then all bets are off again, and we just need to deal with his maturation process. But they said 1 to 2 weeks originally, so I kind of took that, especially after the way Andy Dalton looked. Maybe they'll give him one more breather.
Yeah, I think they give him one more week just to, be 100%. Like, you're not going anywhere this year if you're Carolina. Like, we need Bryce Young out there at like fully operational. It's just disturbing that he has really not shown that same playmaker pizzazz that he did as a collegiate player. And these guys are bigger, faster, stronger. It's going to take some time, I think, with Bryce Young. I think honestly maybe they put too much on his plate too early. Like in training camp, they're talking about him making all the checks at the line, being where he needs to be mentally, even like an NFL veteran, even though he's a rookie. But he is a rookie, and I think he's been slow to catch up physically. He's been slow to catch up mentally so far this year.
Not that we can have any conclusions after 3 weeks, but one mental note I've already made to myself is just I'm going to be far more agnostic with rookies entering the year. I'm just not going to fall for any hype one way or the other. And it's just these GMs don't know what they're doing either. But man, just the way that CJ Stroud's looked versus Bryce Young, my guy JSN. I mean, it's just it's very much a guessing game. But again, things can change. But I'm going to try to remain more agnostic when it comes to the rookies.
Here's a perfect transition to a rookie we should be talking about right now. Los Angeles Chargers, 5th team here. Routes run so far on the season. Keenan Allen, 112. Mike Williams, who we know is now out for the season, 94. Josh Palmer, 80. Tight end Gerald Everett, 52. Not far behind. The second tight end, Donald Parham, at 46. All the way down here is Quentin Johnston, the rookie wide receiver, at 36. Routes run so far this season. So Dalton, I ask you, now that Mike Williams is out for the year, what are you expecting in terms of the split between Josh Palmer picking up the slack or Quentin Johnston picking up the slack?
Another Carnival offense whose pass rate is way up with no Eckler. Man, Josh Kelly, that was a rough one last week. Bad injury for Mike Williams. The answer is Josh Palmer short term, but not only just long term, but if I had to pick right now, I'd rather hold Johnston, and especially if you don't need help right now, I think the upside's greater. You can speak more on this than me. Palmer is, just a guy. He'll put up, 5 for 60, but you don't think he's very good at all as a route runner, correct? And Johnston, I know he's this project, so it may take patience into next year, but that's my thinking. If you need help now, get Palmer. But if I had to choose and for a bench spot, I'd rather Johnston.
I will say the good thing about Palmer right now, and obviously injuries are never good and it stinks for Mike Williams, but I think he is much more suited to take over Mike Williams's role as opposed to last year when Keenan Allen got hurt and they kind of had to thrust him into that position. And because of his route running and stuff like that, he's not at all equipped to be like a short and intermediate level separator. And he's not going to be a great separator at any level of the field, but if you're just asking him to run deeper routes and win contested, that's more of his strength. So he can be a 70-75% approximation of what Mike Williams gave you, that's a pretty steep downgrade if you're taking 30% off of Mike Williams. So that's where I feel about Josh Palmer. But yeah, Johnston is interesting because he's just so raw, man. I was listening to Daniel Popper on the Athletics podcast saying they were always intending to bring him on slow because they knew he was a project. Even getting him to line up in the right spots was going to be a project is the way Popper said it. But all that stuff is out of the window now. Yeah, I mean, I was watching a little bit of Johnson while I was charting Keenan Allen recently, and it's just like he's slipping all over the field. He just is not where he needs to be. Like, so I definitely think some patience for the next few weeks is going to be, and look, we could be idiots and like he could come out and have like a big game against the Raiders. That's totally possible. But I would say patience is going to need to be required for, the next few weeks and even maybe deeper into the season for Quentin Johnson.
And Keenan Allen, you almost can't rank high enough in PPR. Donald Parham, you mocked me openly when I mentioned his name 5 weeks ago on this podcast.
I did.
And yet here he is. I believe he's a 5th or 6th fantasy scoring tight end, yet on everyone's benches, including, or waiver wires. So not helping people, but still, I just had to circle back. Sorry.
No, you definitely had to dunk on me for that. But I think, look, if I know he's like basically it's all tight end, production is chasey, it's fluky, stuff like that. And even with him, it's mostly touchdowns here. But this is a great offense, and he's on the field almost the same amount and running routes as Gerald Everett. So why, if you need tight end help, I do think he should at least be somewhat on the radar here. Speaking of the Raiders, who they play this week, number 6, Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders rank 14th in run blocking grades and 5th in pass blocking grades, according to PFF. And Dalton, I was stunned to see this because after watching that game against the Steelers, and look, that's mostly the Steelers and TJ Watt, like these guys are great up front. I was looking for like, all right, how do I show that the Raiders offensive line is struggling? And then I went through like these metrics. I looked at like PFF's pass blocking efficiency, other metrics. You can't really find a lot of evidence that the Raiders offensive line is not good. And again, Steelers, that's one thing, but they played the Broncos in week 1, and the Bills in week 2. They're somewhere in the middle there. They're probably closer to the Steelers than they are to the Broncos in terms of defense. But I don't know. I thought that was really interesting because I was in my mind when I'm watching Josh Jacobs play, it's like, well, he seems to get contacted a lot early, but maybe it's not an offensive line issue.
Yeah, conversely, they're bottom 3 in pressure rate on defense. That is interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that for offensive line. Jacobs, by the way, no runs of more than 10 yards so far this season. Mm-hmm. This is all interesting news for Jimmy G as a possible, maybe super flex more so than or a DFS play, but he's going to throw more than he was in San Francisco. And this week would have been a nice possible shootout here against the Chargers indoors with Davante Adams and Jacoby Myers, whom he's, by the way, is targeting like 88% of the receiver targets when they're all on the field. It's crazy. The condensed, it's awesome there. But unfortunately, Jimmy G's dealing with this concussion issue, and it might be Brian Hoyer to ruin all the fun short term. But Aiden O'Connell, looked so good in the preseason, but Hoyer may be a short-term problem for everyone involved here. Because if it's healthy Jimmy G, this could be almost a replica of last week's Vikings-Chargers matchup. It could be a fun one for fantasy.
Yeah, I was trying to think because someone asked me during the game on Sunday, where does Davante Adams and Jacoby Myers rank for wide receiver duos? And, Jacoby Myers is a pure 2, but he's a really, really good 2. He just is not quite the same as the Eagles have Devontae Smith, who's like a 1B. He's not as good as T. Higgins in Cincinnati. He's not as good as like Jalen Waddle in Miami, but he's a really, really good player and he's been awesome so far. So yeah, it'd be great to see Jimmy Garoppolo out there, but probably not this week. And yeah, if you're the Raiders, like, why not just play Aiden O'Connell? Like, what do you have to lose at this point? You're not going anywhere. You're not. The season's basically already over for the Raiders. Like, at least just see what Aiden O'Connell has, but probably won't get that. We'll probably get Brian Hoyer. Number 7, Houston Texans. You mentioned CJ Stroud, dude. This guy's been awesome. CJ Stroud leads the NFL with 334 passing yards between 10 and 19 yards down the field. That intermediate area has been so critical for the Texans. And Dalton, there's so many ways that we could talk about why CJ Stroud has been impressive, but the fact that it's been not like little dinky dunky gadgety like short stuff, the fact that he's just eating with Nico Collins running in breakers, with Tank Dell eating on out routes and like deep corner routes like he had against the Jaguars. That is what's so impressive to me about CJ Stroud's start, among a variety of things.
CJ Stroud is the truth, man. He's just been so impressive. He was doing a lot of it on third downs and obvious passing situation without much help from his running game, just going downfield. You look at the film, it looks just awesome. He's throwing so many dimes. Dameon Pierce, the bad news. Dameon Pierce not only is losing passing down work previously to Mike Boone, but now clock killing work to Devin Singletary. So now it's like game script positive bad, game script negative bad for him. He's too good to be treated like this. This pains me to ask you this as a Nico Collins guy, but rest of season, Nico Collins or Tank Dell. Have you seen the first read target percentages? I mean, they're going on opposite directions from week one, and Tank Dell just looks so awesome.
I have these guys in the same tier, but I have them like between 31 and like 38 in terms of rest of season.
Okay.
I think they're close, but I think Nico is still probably the guy I'd prefer. But no, they're legit. Both of them are really good, and I think they can coexist because they're so dissimilar role wise. Like Nico's a pure X, and Tank Dell they've used kind of at all three positions, but he's still primarily an outside guy, despite the fact that he's sub 170 pounds. And he's such a good route runner. He's such a good technician. And he's so explosive, dude. He's like, I made the comparison. I think, I don't know what show it was on at this point, but he's kind of like John Brown a little bit back in the day. And, I loved John Brown. So high praise.
Smokey, yeah. Yeah, no, he's had at least one touchdown nullified too. He's just looked fantastic. I think most of his production has come out wide, which is just remarkable for his size. But either way, it's good to have two awesome options for CJ Stroud. What a way to enter the league. A little different than Carolina's receivers over there, but man, Stroud's dropping dimes to no matter who he's throwing to.
Yeah, he's pitching heat out there. Number 8, Tennessee Titans in the AFC South. Not so fun. And this was one offensive line stat that's not going to shock anybody. Tennessee actually might shock people that they're 31st. Tennessee ranks 31st in PFF's pass blocking efficiency, somehow not dead last. Not only can they not pass protect with Ryan Tannehill back there, which is basically like, okay, you can forget about everybody else in this offense except DeAndre Hopkins from a pass game standpoint, but even from a run game standpoint so far this year, Derrick Henry, 17 attempts per game. That's down from previous years. Game scripts, that's going to make a problem. The fact that Tajay Spears seems to be giving him something, that's going to be a problem. I don't know. Where are we at with the Tennessee Titans offense, who might well have the worst offensive line in the league?
I'm saying start Derrick Henry in DFS this week. I know Spears has outsnapped him, but the Bengals allowing 5.1 yards per carry, bottom 5 in rush defense DVOA. As you said, they can't pass protect, so game script may be more favorable. Cincinnati off a short week. I'm going back to the well with Henry and treating him like a borderline top 5 fantasy back this week. Now, if he doesn't execute this week, then it's panic time. Treylon Burks, underlying usage much better last week. DeAndre Hopkins is clearly not right. Burks is, if you're desperate for a flex, I actually think he might have a nice game this week.
Good luck to you.
No, okay. All right. You're not in on that one. All right. What about the Henry pushback? You think you think the decline is real here, or can he not have a vintage 102 TD game?
I mean, I hope not, but the fact that he's on the injury report with the foot, that's what's got me a little sketched out here. Is it a foot or is it a toe? Whatever. He's on the injury report, so I'm hoping he's just 100%, and that's not been why they've started to mix in Spears. But I think if they mix in Spears, it could be good for Derrick Henry's long-term health too. So no, I mean, he could look. I am hoping he can just get right at any moment because I love Derrick Henry. I just think this start to this season between the offensive line issues and the overall offensive effectiveness when they've been playing a team that's not the LA Chargers, it's got me a little spooked there. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, Tannehill has struggled. It hasn't been great so far for Tennessee.
Number 9, Cincinnati Bengals. You just mentioned them. Joe Burrow's completion rate over expected ranks 34th among all quarterbacks. And dude, watching them on Monday night, it felt that way. I know they won the game. I think the Rams probably could have done a little bit more to win that game. That was a tough spot for the Rams there, especially when they started losing offensive linemen. But Jamar Chase was awesome. Jamar Chase is just like a human highlight reel. He's an offense all to himself. There was T. Higgins drops. I get all that, but I'm watching Burrow in that game, and it's just like, dude, they can't run an offense right now when Burrow's playing this way.
Burrow does not look right, obviously. I believe it was 30 of 31 snaps in the first half were taken in shotgun. So, I mean, this kind of has to limit the team's ability to run as well. But let me ask you, I think I'm going to hype Jamar Chase in my DFS column this week. There's a lot of good receivers you're going to have to pick from in DFS this week, not just Hill and Jefferson, but Diggs in a big matchup and Allen and Adams there. But Chase faces the pass funnel Titans defense, and Higgins is banged up. He left the end of that game with some sort of injury, and obviously Chase looks so good there, and he's going to start scoring some more touchdowns. What are your thoughts there? Obviously, I don't need to tell me that he's good, but how concerned are you with Burrow moving, in the short term, 6 days later after playing?
Yeah, that is definitely concerning. He said he didn't tweak it at any point during the game, Joe Burrow with the calf, but I think the fact that they got Jamar Chase moving around so much, I think he had more slot snaps than he's had at any point since the first week of the 2022 season. Last week against the Rams, that's really good to see. And they can do some designery stuff with him to get him free and get him big plays, because that's really what they need. Like, they need him to be adding extra stuff on top of whatever Burrow can provide at this point. So no, I'm with you, dude. And yeah, watching the oh my God, watching the Titans pass defense is just, it's so bad. It's so bad.
And you can't run against them, so it's perfect for fantasy pass catchers.
Yeah, like, and that's another thing too. The Bengals are not going to be able to like necessarily mount a consistent, steady run game with Joe Mixon at this point, even though he's looked fine so far. So they'll have to like throw short passes to Chase, who still he's had a few big plays, with especially against the Rams on Monday night, but we haven't seen him rip like a huge long yak play that could come at any moment. So I'll sign off on that take.
All right, okay.
Number 10, Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence's 8% drop pass rate leads all starting quarterbacks according to Fantasy Points data, but he trails only Tua in accuracy rate so far this year. Dalton, the more, we talked a lot about the Jags on the People's Panic Meter podcast earlier in this week. I've thought a lot about them, been watching Calvin Ridley, for reception perception and stuff. The more I've thought about it, I'm more like, this stuff with the Jags, like, it's a lot of random stuff like drop passes and like they're a couple big plays away every single game. Does it just feel like it's all just going to get right at some point, or am I being naive?
I wrote in my numbers do lie column last week that the Jacksonville offense is due for regression, and it only got worse the following week. More drops and craziness. First of all, let me say that 41% of the people were knocked out in my big $9 million survivor pool with Jacksonville, and almost 75% is out of the pool in the first 3 weeks, which was pretty wild. A carnage day for sure. Where do we begin? Trevor Lawrence has 9 on-target throws that are dropped, easily an NFL high. He leads the league in accuracy throws at 10 plus yards downfield, open receivers. It's just crazy that Jags offense has lost 15 expected points because of drops this season. They're somehow top 10 in success rate, but 28th in EPA per play. So yes, regression is coming. Calvin Ridley leads the NFL in drops. He dropped a 30-yard touchdown last week. I think all of his drops might have been possible touchdowns, including a couple that don't count as drops in the end zone. So it's just been wild and weird. And that one game was full of heat that sent more than 100 people needed to be treated medically. So I'm still bullish on them moving forward, but it's been such a weird start. And I hope Calvin Ridley's healthy. I don't know if that is the reason, because he's, he got banged up a couple times and he's hobbling out there, but it's been frustrating. My guy, Travis Etienne, is the second most routes run among all running backs this year. He also left banged up last week. Hope he's okay. Bigsby continues to make mistakes, yet gets rewarded with goal line carries anyway. But I digress. It's been really frustrating if you're rooting for the Jaguars so far, and I expect them to be much better moving forward.
It's good that you highlighted ETN though, because I think his role has been quietly like not discussed enough in fantasy. And if you're just talking about running backs you want rest of season, I don't think you can come up with more than maybe like 5-6 guys that you'd rather have rest of season. So he's in a really good spot. That's a good one to highlight. 11th, New York Jets.
By the way, now they have back-to-back London games. Sorry to interrupt, but weird schedule. I mean, they have to go now to London for 2 back-to-back games. It's interesting. It's going to be an interesting start for that franchise. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just what you want. Again, when things are not going your way, you want a big, nice road trip across the world. That's perfect. Number 11, New York Jets. Zach Wilson ranks 34th in EPA per play among quarterbacks. So Trevor Siemian to the rescue. The Jets signed Trevor Siemian on Tuesday, Dalton. Well, what do we make? Is Trevor Siemian enough to say? How can they keep running out Zach Wilson, bro? Like, I feel so bad for Robert Saleh. He's got to be up there talking about Zach Wilson. Like, come on, man. Anything else? Like, Trevor Siemian literally cannot be worse than this.
Yeah. John Legeza tweeted and tagged me, I think, just so we can read off his tweet on this, how bad Zach Wilson's been. But it's 34th in EPA per attempt, 34th in EPA per drop back. And just
34th. Hey, by the way, there are 32 teams.
He sacked himself last week. Did you see that? He did a spin move and went down. It's not great. Siemian, you look at his career numbers and it's better. The TD percentage, the INT percentage is lower, the YPA, I think Siemian's probably going to be starting sooner than later, and it sucks for Wilson, but he's just doesn't look capable of playing NFL quarterback.
No. Not at all. All right, number 12, New England Patriots, who are the other team that participated in that
leads
game.
NFL in yards per touch?
Who? Oh, Breece Hall. It's Breece Hall, right?
Yes, and he's quietly getting more snaps. So if we can just have a C- QB, come on, there's life. Breece Hall led the NFL in yards per touch last year, and he currently is the leader now.
Honestly, yeah, no, just a functional NFL quarterback on this team, and we can at least consider using these players in fantasy, because how can you like Scott said it best about Garrett Wilson? Like, if somebody came to you on Sunday and is like, hey, you either roll the dice and you get whatever you get with Garrett Wilson, or I can guarantee you he's going to get 5 catches for 48 yards. Like, you take the 5 for 48 if you had to play him.
100%. Yeah, no, it's not good.
All right, number 12, New England Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson ranks 11th in expected fantasy points according to Fantasy Points data. I don't know where I stand with Ramondre right now, man, because, you know, the Zeke usage is at least there. Ramondre is just, I don't think he's moved the needle enough to like ice out Zeke completely in the backfield. This offense plays really fast, but doesn't really go anywhere. I don't know. Where are you at with Ramondre right now?
Yeah, Zeke's runs have dropped. He's not getting the work in the red zone, but this is a revenge game. Ramondre, I'm just kind of the same as I was before the season. It's he's going to be a solid type RB2 each week, but the upside's just not quite there with the offense and the player he's capable of being.
Number 13, Arizona Cardinals. Marquise Brown ranks 13th in air yard share among all pass catchers and 14th in target share. Love seeing this from Marquise Brown because, you know, I think he's like kind of an underrated player. And Josh Dobbs, even though his own damn team doesn't have his jersey for sale in the team store, he's been pretty good so far for the Arizona Cardinals. So I think Marquise Brown is like on the wide receiver 3 borderline basically every single game.
I'm not sure what's going on here. His expert consensus ranked is 49th, and 2 weeks ago he was a 26th receiver, and last week he was the 19th receiver, and the 49ers opponents have by far the highest pass rate over expectation this season. It's not even close. I mean, I have him as a, borderline top 25 wideout, top 30 this week. So even if I don't think it's going to come in garbage time either, by the way. I think this spread is wildly, maybe I'm just panic mode is possibly using Niners and Survivor, but 14-point spread, you realize this is a matchup between 2 top 10 teams in DVOA. The Cardinals are first in the league in rushing yards before contact. Cardinals are first in the league. They just ran all over Dallas. I mean, I don't know. The Niners have this look-ahead game that Colin Producer has been talking about Sunday Night Football against Dallas, who Dallas may have been looking ahead, by the way. The Niners follow. I mean, this is a classic trap game if you want to fall for that stuff. But the Niners' 14-point spread to me seems really high for the way this Cardinals team is playing.
Yeah, Cardinals are playing hard, man. They're giving the big old middle finger to tanking. So we love to see that from John Gannon and the boys there. You mentioned the Giants. They thrashed this team on Thursday night last week, the New York Giants, number 14. Daniel Jones adjusted yards per attempt by week. Week 1, 0.5. That was against the Dallas Cowboys at full strength. Week 2, against the Cardinals, which, as we're saying, the Cardinals are not a joke, all right? The Cardinals are not like a complete joke of a team. 8.5 adjusted yards per attempt. Week 3, 2.9 against your San Francisco 49ers. And so those are 2 of the 3 best defenses in the NFL. The Cowboys in week 1, the 49ers in week 3, and then the Browns are up there as well. I think those are the 3 best defenses in the NFL right now. So I think, look, the Giants are not a good team. They're not going to be that fun to watch, but I still think Daniel Jones has much better days ahead in fantasy.
Yep, he's going to be schedule dependent, it appears. He's always struggled more inside his division, but I have him as a top 12 fantasy QB this week, easily, no problem. Seahawks have allowed this to quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford, 334 yards, Jared Goff, 323 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Andy Dalton, 361 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, Danny Dimes, top 12, top 10 fantasy QB in week number 4.
Wan'Dale Robinson getting back there is interesting because Paris Campbell's given him like nothing as a slot receiver. And
immediately eating up the targets. Immediately, Wan'Dale. Immediately.
He's definitely on the Kadarius Toney scale of like all the targets per route run bros are going to always go crazy over Wan'Dale Robinson because it's like designed stuff. But that's still, fair. I do think Wan'Dale is like a good player in that role and like a much more technically sound player and reliable player than Kadarius Toney. So I don't mean to put Kadarius Toney on Wan'Dale Robinson like that, but he's a boost for this offense because go ahead.
You've always been down on Paris Campbell and he received a lot of hype. Like he was getting all the looks and you just look so right. Yeah. The small, shifty receiver who's not a good route runner is always the MVP of OTAs.
always the MVP of OTAs. All right, number 15, LA Rams. No other running back played a freaking snap for the Rams on Monday night other than Kyren Williams against the Cincinnati Bengals. But it didn't go very well for Kyren Williams, I wouldn't say. So where are we at with him after this game against the Bengals?
I mean, I used him as one of my conviction picks last week, saying with this volume, he's a top 12 fantasy RB moving forward. But will this volume stay if he continues to make these mistakes? He cost an interception against the Niners. Last week could have been another one. He's not rush yards over expectation. I know he's toward the bottom too. So he's not exactly lighting the football field on fire when he's out there. But if he remains in this role, he's going to be awesome for fantasy managers who picked him up for free. But I mean, there's no one else there either really behind him. Is Zach Evans? I mean, I have him in super deep leagues, but he was in a healthy scratch. Ronnie Rivers is getting no snaps. So on one hand, you love it. On the other, you worry that the playing time may dissipate if the skills don't improve.
Yeah, Kyren Williams definitely down towards the bottom. He's in the Alexander Madison zone, which is not where you want to be from a rush yards over expectation standpoint.
But a million targets, and he's getting I mean, not just volume. I mean, just everything, the goal line, the targets, everything.
I know I said on this podcast last week that, Kyren Williams, like a space back. He got like 10 targets against the Niners, right? You know, they're running a ton of plays. They want to throw the ball. That's all great in theory. And I think Matthew Stafford can execute that. But the moment they had an offensive line injury against the Bengals, I mean, that was stone cold disaster. And it felt like we were right back in 2022 Rams zone. So this does remain a very fragile ecosystem for Kyren Williams and the boys there.
Impressive Tutu Atwell. He can play.
Yeah, he can definitely play. Number 16, New Orleans Saints. Jameis Winston ranks 25th in EPA per play among week 3 quarterbacks. Dalton, are you one of these people that's like excited to see Jameis Winston start games for New Orleans Saints? Because that's probably what's going to happen. We're a little revenge game here in week 4 against Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a little Jameis Winston in their life? I'm enjoying the gifts this week. Sure. Okay, fine. What about their defense? Let's turn the subject a little. They know the Saints have not allowed 20 points in a game since week 9 of last year. So very impressive defense there. And let's hope Derek Carr, I can't believe I did that. Leave that in. Derek Carr returns ASAP.
Yeah, same. They are just working with like one brain, like a hive mind back there on defense that communicates so well. And we get Marshawn Lattimore verse Mike Evans when Mike Evans has had a really nice start to the season. So this Saints defense playing as well as it has. You know, Jameis on the other side here, Baker Mayfield, or do we get... We weirdly got like the very middle of Baker Mayfield. Usually in a primetime event, I'm expecting like either great Baker Mayfield or like Garbo Baker Mayfield. So maybe this is the week we get a mess of a Mayfield performance, a mess of a Jameis Winston performance, and like Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore are full on like boxing at the logo in the middle by the end of it. That would at least be entertaining.
For sure. Imagine drafting Chris Godwin over Mike Evans this year.
Shut up, Dalton. Anyways, number 17 here. You can gloat a little more about Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I didn't draft either one of those guys, but I am fully like, I got to call Mike Evans and like ask for forgiveness. I feel so bad about not drafting him in one single league and not listening to Dalton Del Don, who's much smarter than me. But anyways.
No.
Yeah, yes. I'm giving you credit on this one because you tried to talk me into Mike Evans. You really handed out. I think you even might have quoted my own data back at me, and I was still like, no, Baker Mayfield's not good enough. I don't know when I'm going to learn the lesson that like if these guys aren't Zach Wilson, these great receivers can play with these guys.
Godwin will be better, but he's missing those designed targets. And I mean, Evans, 3rd most air yards per game last year. He just looks awesome too. That catch the other night was just so sick.
Number 17, Tampa Bay Bucs. So we're talking about them. Not going to talk about the receivers here. Among the top 20 running backs in rush yards, Rachaad White has the second fewest percentage of his carries to go for 5+ yards. Jerome Ford, who is a backup running back, obviously, is the lowest. Dude, Rachaad White, I mean, what are we doing here?
He was dead last in rush yards over expectation last year, but again, there's no one else there in the volume. So I don't know, these dead zone backs, I mean, you can't be, I don't know, on one hand you're happy, on the other you're worried.
Yeah, like can he play the Bears on a weekly basis? No, Otherwise, it's just like, it's a disaster.
Very matchup dependent, for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. And hopefully you didn't play him against the Eagles, where he got a safety. Finally, I mean, what is it with NFL refs this year? Like, unless Gardner Minshew runs out the back of the end zone or you know, Rachaad White is tackled like 5 yards deep in the end zone, it feels like we never get safeties anymore.
Yeah, there have been a couple close calls I thought were sure were going to, and even a hold in this in a game over the weekend, and they're just they're giving the benefit of the doubt to the offense.
The Micah Parsons hold. I mean,
yes,
dude,
that was it, 100%. Thank you. Yeah.
The defensive players should. I mean, come on, like restore the defense at some point. This is absolutely outrageous. Honestly, it's a little bit offensive to the game of football, and I'm saying that while I'm hosting a fantasy football podcast. But the offensive bias is a little ridiculous. No, they don't need to change Colin in the chat is saying they need to change the touchback fumble rule. No, they should keep the touchback fumble rule, because if you screw up at the goal line, you deserve to be punished. Okay.
I'm kind of with Colin on that one. I don't love it.
Of course you are. Yeah. I mean, of course you are. No, if you screw up around the end zone, you deserve to be punished extra hard for it. All right.
But that player
18.
might be on my fantasy team, Harmon.
Right. Well, you know,
missing the point here.
I just want people to not make mistakes in critical moments. And if you do make a mistake in critical moments and you get tackled in the damn end zone, it should be a safety. Or if you commit a holding penalty in the end zone, it should be a safety. Okay. I get it. We're all fantasy football players. We want the best for these offensive guys, but at some point, we've got to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and really appreciate the actual football game. I'm just saying. You screw up around the end zone, you deserve to be punished extra hard for it. And that's just my stance on it. All right, number 18, Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys rank 6th in EPA per dropback and 8th in rushing EPA. I don't know. People seem to be a little concerned about the Cowboys right now. I'm not. I think they'll be fine offensively.
Yeah, Dak Prescott a buy low in fantasy. He's currently ranked as a QB 18 in expert consensus rank this week at home. They are just struggling mightily in the red zone this season after being first in efficiency touchdown scoring last season. Dak leads the NFL in red zone attempts, though. The touchdowns will come. It's been a disaster for him so far. He has just 1.6 more fantasy points than Anthony Richardson, who's played 5 quarters. Speaking of AR, those are the two at the very bottom of the league in attempting the fewest passes, 15 plus yards downfield, but I expect that to change. Maybe Dak's a little worried about his interceptions last season, but Brandon Cooks was back last week. Gallup looked the best he has in years. CD's still there. They dealt with a cluster of offensive line injuries last week in that upset, so I expect that to improve, and at home, Dak will put up a couple scores this week.
Yeah, I like that call. I would say struggling in the red zone is kind of a Mike McCarthy thing. And I also
they were first in the NFL last year. McCarthy's calling the calls. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
and that interception that Dak threw was ghastly last week. 3 different Cardinals could have caught the ball in the end zone at the end of last week. But okay, it's a great point. Maybe they won't regress as much as people are hoping with McCarthy calling plays down there. Yeah,
and maybe I'm being extra hard on myself because I, like a jackass on this podcast, was like, people need to apologize to Mike McCarthy, and then they promptly blow a classic Cowboys game against the Arizona Cardinals on the road. Like, so, you know, and also I realize they had offensive line injuries, and that is probably a very reasonable explanation. If you're Mike McCarthy, don't say that. Like, don't blame it on the offensive line. Just own it, for God's sakes. But again, maybe I'm jaded because I was too nice to Mike McCarthy. Who am I? All right, number 19 is the Green Bay Packers. We're skipping them for Thursday Night Football. So on to number 20, the Cleveland Browns. The Browns lead the NFL in plays per game right now. I will say I feel a little more encouraged about Deshaun Watson after that game against the Tennessee Titans. But Dalton, it's Tennessee Titans who are a joke of a pass defense. So I don't know. You know, Amari Cooper has been quietly balling this year. He's been great on contested catches, which is not really the typical Amari Cooper experience. Elijah Moore's been getting targets, but not enough downfield targets. I'm still trying to figure out like where we are with this Browns passing offense.
And Cooper was robbed of a 40-yard touchdown. They blew the whistle. He was not out of bounds. It cost him a touchdown and 40 extra yards, and obviously Deshaun Watson as well. So he's looked great playing through that hamstring injury. Elijah Moore as well. So Deshaun Watson definitely looked improved. Agreed there. But I kind of want to take this in a different direction. Just talk about this defense is off to a historical start. They lead the league in pressure rate, fewest yards per play. They've allowed only 21 first downs over 3 games. The Dolphins had 17 before halftime last week. They've allowed 1 offensive touchdown. Their offense is allowed 2. Their Browns defense have played 9 snaps in the red zone this season. I mean, they've allowed 3 drives of 39 drives to even enter the red zone. The single best, 3 best defensive performances this season based on success rate are the Browns in week 1, week 2, and in week 3, all by the Browns. It's just crazy, man. It's just Jim Schwartz. Well done.
Yeah, shout out, man. Like I said, I think it's one of the 3 best defenses in the NFL right now. They've been incredible. the bar for Watson to clear is like so low for this team to be very, very good because that defense is going to carry the day. Did you hear apparently that same podcast that I listened with Daniel Popper earlier? They're talking to a Browns beat writer, and apparently Jim Schwartz, if they don't, if one of their teammates makes a big play and they don't celebrate it, he counts it as like a loaf, and they get ripped in the film room for it. Like the energy and enthusiasm that he's bringing is pretty cool to see.
Nice. I like that. Yeah.
Number 21, Buffalo Bills. First read targets on the Bills. Stephon Diggs predictably 23, nearly 40% according to Fantasy Points data. Gabe Davis at 10, Dalton Kincaid 7, Dawson Knox 5, Deontay Hardy 5. We talk a lot about these two tight ends, but there's not a lot of plays actually designed for them, which is like bringing down my enthusiasm on a weekly basis for both of these guys here.
Yeah, I was more optimistic about Kincaid after week 1, but that's kind of quieted since then. Diggs hasn't had an eruption game yet, and he was quiet against both Dolphins matchups last week relatively, but you could see him going off here. Man, Gabe Davis is just relies on the touchdowns just so much. And speaking of touchdowns or lack thereof, James Cook's on pace for 1,850 yards from scrimmage and 0 touchdowns. That may change this week. Should be a high-scoring game. The DFS matchup to target here. The Bills are allowing NFL high in yards per carry, and now they face a Dolphins team that just went crazy.
Number 22, the team that just played Buffalo, Sam Howell, Washington Commanders. Sam Howell is first in turnover-worthy pass rate. He also ranks 3rd in pressures converted to sacks. Yeah, no kidding. And 34th in adjusted net yards per attempt because he takes all of those sacks. Dalton, I feel like I'm on a damn roller coaster here where I felt really good about Sam Howell last week, and then I feel about as bad as I could feel about a quarterback coming off that performance in Buffalo. I mean, you just can't take that many sacks and turn the ball over like that and like stay on the field for much longer.
You can't, and the offensive line's a problem, but it's on the quarterback here. He's holding the ball far too long. The stats show it. So definitely Howell needs to improve in that area. I'd like to say that Cole Turner last week led all tight ends in expected fantasy points. He was tackled at the 1 and later targeted in the end zone. And now he gets an Eagles defense allowing the most fantasy points to the position, and opponents have to pass the ball a lot. So if Cole Turner, man, if Logan Thomas is out again this week, look for him as a cheap DFS option.
God, enough already with these tight ends and the running backs. Like, let's get the ball to the receivers, man. This is the best.
I know McLaurin and Dotson. I know we both love them both, and it's just been a disaster. Really, really ugly. I don't know. The Dotson target per route run rate dating even back to his rookie year is a little scary. I don't know. What do you think we'd be okay here? And it's just variance 3 games and it'll be fine.
I really hope so. And the fact that they have such a chaos man back there at quarterback, it is a little problematic. Like, I think they need to simplify things and like get the reads out to McLaurin and Dotson, and that's it. And Samuel too. Samuel deserves his share of the pie here, but I don't know. It's definitely concerning because I can't find one single reason like why it would be on the players, like the receivers, because these guys are open like every play. They're such good route runners, and like that is translated to this year for Dotson. So, but it is I don't have like a reason why it would change other than it needs to change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not great when I'm hyping Cole Turner.
No, it is not. We don't look. Shout out to Cole Turner. Sure, he's a wonderful fellow, but we don't want that to be the case here. All right, number 23, Seattle Seahawks. This one comes in from Scott Barrett. Team expected fantasy point market share when leading. Tyler Algier is first in the NFL. Second is Brian Robinson. Fourth is Kenneth Walker. Team expected market share when trailing. Kenneth Walker plummets all the way down to 20th. Same with Brian Robinson and Tyler Algier. They plummet down the list as well. Kenneth Walker's been awesome this year, but it's a little troubling that Charbonnet, I mean, unless you're a Charbonnet bro, it's been troubling to see him getting more and more work, especially in the exact type of game script that we would expect him to start stealing snaps from Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I was close to using Kenneth Walker in my numbers lie column, debating it here because he's on one hand running hot on touchdowns big time, which is a regression from Seattle, who got like the league's fewest goal line carries last year. And Charbonnet has absolutely seen increased usage and not just in garbage time. But on the other hand, Walker is really good, breaking 1 million tackles. Yeah. He set a career high in receiving last game. And the Seahawks are going to produce a lot of touchdown opportunities for him. So maybe he's not the top, what I think is like the number 3 fantasy back right now. But he can be top 12 easily, even with Charbonnet eating into that. So 35%. So apologies again for JSN, man. What a disaster. Like so far, the ADOT is just just not coming at all. And I don't really know what to make of it. On one hand, I wanted to argue with Andy Behrens and say the problem isn't that he's sharing the field with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I mean, Addison is behind Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and KJ Osborne. But at the same time, they're not running 11 personnel a ton because they're being so effective running the ball out of 12. Yeah. So it is a problem that they do have these awesome receivers. But even when the targets have been there for JSN, they've all been at the line of scrimmage. And I don't know if that's a reflection on the coaching or the player. But right now, you can only bench him, stash him.
It's tough for me to say it's on the coaching because I think Shane Waldron does a great job as an offensive coordinator. Did you see the video that's been making the rounds on Twitter today where like Gino has been, he like went up to JSN and was like, I need you, man. I need you in the second half. Was like kind of trying to hype him up, right? Like anything that's gone bad for you is like I'll send it to you after the show, but like anything that's gone bad for you, it's like on me. And like JSN was kind of in and out, like responded to it. I was like, ooh, I don't want to overreact to like one 30-second clip, but it was like, I don't know why. It's a little concerning that he would need that like much of a push, but maybe just, again, it's start to his NFL career. Maybe he just hasn't really gotten it going yet.
Playing through a broken wrist too, but it has been very discouraging. He ranks like last in ADOT.
Yeah. It's weird. Wouldn't have expected that. Number 24, Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson ranked 18th in EPA per dropback in week 3. Part of me wants to chalk up what happened to the Ravens as like, it's a blip. The Colts are a little more underrated than people want to give them credit for, but the Ravens are so banged up again. You know, Odell Beckham's injured. Rashad Bateman's got a hamstring injury again. You know, it's like Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, like, and that's it. Like the offensive line is banged up. The running back room is ravaged. I don't know, man. I'm getting a little concerned that everybody in Baltimore is a little too injured for this offense to reach its ceiling.
So if Bateman and Beckham are both missed the games, and disregard of what I'm about to say, but Mark Andrews' role has not been the same out of Greg Roman's system. Jacob Gibbs tweeted that he's accounted for 20% of Lamar Jackson's first read targets over the first 2 weeks, and when they were healthy last year, that was at 34%. Zay Flowers has eaten 37% of those first read targets this year. So that is at least something to note. Not that you're lowering, maybe Hawkinson's 2 and Andrews is 3, whatever. You're using them every week, and these injuries will help too. But something to note that he's being used differently in this system and with Flowers.
Flowers has been awesome, but I could use a few less like curl and stick routes than we got against the Indianapolis Colts. Number 25. Detroit Lions. We're skipping them for Thursday Night Football. Number 26, Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco kind of quietly ranks 18th among running backs in expected fantasy points right now. Pacheco's role has been growing. We still haven't really seen, it's been a minute since we've seen the Chiefs in like a normal game because whatever was going on in Chicago was not a normal game, but it kind of feels like they're starting to narrow their receivers down to the guys they want, and same with Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield.
Pacheco played through that groin injury too last week. He was tackled inside the 5 twice and had a target at the goal line failed all in the first half when McKinnon and CEH combined for 3 touchdowns. So very frustrating for him. He did later score and he looks good. And I think Pacheco is a real solid fantasy option moving forward. Speaking of bad luck, Rashee Rice was tackled twice at the 1-yard line last week. His playing time is quietly increasing. In targets per route run this season, it's Tyreek Hill 1, Devontae Adams 2, and Rice 3. He should be added in every single fantasy league.
Yeah, he looks like a big boy after the catch, which is a nice development because that was, I think, his best trait as a collegiate player. But he's also it's been kind of a journey at the catch point. So there's some inconsistency he needs to iron out, but I like what I've seen so far from Rice. Number 27, Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons rank 4th in sack rate allowed and 23rd in PFF's pass blocking efficiency. Dalton, quietly, the offensive line has been kind of a big issue for the Falcons, and they spent a lot of resources on that. You know, they brought back 2 of their starters, paid Lindstrom like a huge contract. But so far, that has been an issue, and I think it's been among many reasons, an issue why the pass game hasn't gotten off the map yet.
Offensive line, Ritter being horribly inaccurate last game, but I know you're going to roll your eyes, but I'm going to go here. What do we make of Kyle Pitts, man? He's 1st in route participation, 1st in air yard share, 4th in expected fantasy points. That moves to number 1 if you account for the penalties and the defensive penalties alone he's drawn. That said, dude's averaging 2.6 catches, 32 yards, 5 targets over his last 13 games. Did he look quite right, even with his coming from this MCL on that deep pass?
Nope.
I don't know. 91% route participation this year. So it's all up, even with Jonnu Smith also getting the targets. So again, it's on one hand, positives, on the other, negatives. So I would be shocked if Kyle Pitts doesn't finish as a top 12 fantasy tight end this season, just because, I mean, the bar is so low at the position. But I can understand why people are so frustrated, and his ECR is dropping below that right now. So what do you make of the Pitts conundrum?
Yeah, I think a big part of it right now, and this wasn't an issue last year. Like last year, I think he looked good. This year, I don't think he's looked 100%. He's coming back from this injury, and like he's just not fully firing at this point. And there's such a low margin for error because they use him so deep down the field. Like he's their vertical shot player, whereas Drake London is kind of that intermediate target hog. Like he has a 9 point something ADOT, does Drake London, whereas Kyle Pitts is up there. So I think that's a bit like the fact he isn't running perfectly, but he's their deep threat guy. Like that I think has been a big part of the problem so far.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and their pass rate over expectations last in the league, so they're just going to run it like crazy. Yeah, he doesn't look right, and the underlying stats may be a bit of a lie, because you're right, the way they use him is just not going to translate into consistent production. But man, he's a frustrating player.
Number 28, Indianapolis Colts. Josh Downs has a 20% share of the first read targets in Indy. Quietly playing more, quietly getting more involved. I love Josh Downs, man. And, initially coming into this year, I was like, look, I just want Anthony Richardson in this offense to be good enough to make Michael Pittman a thing. That has happened, but I have now raised my expectations where I think that Josh Downs can be legit really involved with this team right now. It's mostly been short targets. They have been throwing the ball short a lot. They're getting it out quickly. They run with a lot of pace, but that pace can boost a sleeper up out of this offense. Why can't it be Josh Downs, who again was one of my favorite prospects in this class?
Yeah, he's looked great. And if nothing else, he'll really help Richardson's fantasy value coming back. Another option there to throw to. Hopefully AR get healthy soon. And then Zach Moss, one of the biggest, full-on workhorses in the league suddenly. And he's looked way better too. He's not just getting the volume. He's actually looked good out there. I've been shocked at how good Zach Moss has looked.
Same. It's been great to see. Number 29, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kenny Pickett ranked 7th in EPA per dropback in week 3. That was compared to 32nd in week 2 and 29th in week 1. It's similar to the Daniel Jones analysis where, look, when you get these guys away from some of the best defenses in the NFL, if they're like average starting quarterbacks, those teams will make an average starting quarterback look like a joke of a quarterback. But look, Pickett was far from perfect against the Raiders on Sunday night, but I'm at least like putting my expectations a little bit higher, although that offensive line remains a huge, huge problem, primarily in the run game, though.
Yeah, they opened up with the Niners and Browns defenses, might be the top 2 in the league, and then the Raiders, and then it was his first multiple TD pass game of Pickett's career. So, yeah, he's going to be a matchup-dependent type guy, but nice to see him succeed, even if it was against a team bottom 3 in pressure rate. Nice to see Freiermuth get involved as well.
Yeah, not the worst schedule either. They get Houston this week, do the Pittsburgh Steelers, then the Ravens, who are very banged up on defense too. Bye week, Rams, who, if you can block Aaron Donald, you can get over on that defense, and then the Jags and the Titans in weeks 8 and 9. Number 30, Philadelphia Eagles. Man, DeAndre Swift is balling out right now. Among running backs with 10-plus carries, according to Fantasy Points data, DeAndre Swift ranks 4th in zone concept success rate, behind only Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, and Devon Achane, who of course just blew up last week. And he has only had a few runs out of like man gap concepts blocking scheme, but he has 100% success rate. Like DeAndre Swift, he's been balling out, but also like this is such a good rushing ecosystem. Like, could we be looking at a potentially special run game here with the way Swift has played on top of just, wide open lanes? Normally I roll my eyes, Dalton, if people are like, I could get 5 yards behind an offensive line, but maybe behind this Eagles offensive line.
Yeah, just wide lanes, no doubt. I believe Swift has been tackled at the 1-yard line 3 separate times this season. Man, I'm jealous of people who have him on. I wish I had him on more of my fantasy teams. I have him a couple, but
me too.
He was dominating opportunities before that final 15-play drive in garbage time to 18-7 and to Kenneth Gainwell, who had 9 of his 14 carries over the last 2 drives. That said, Dwayne McFarland points out that it might have been a quarter thing, because in quarter number 2, Swift saw 26% of the snaps, and Gainwell saw 72%. And in the fourth, it was like 0 to 100. So we all just assume it was the garbage time, but it might have been a rotation in quarters there. So don't just write that in pen yet. But Swift looks like the better player and he's awesome. And in that environment, who cares? Whatever. He's going to be, you must start DeAndre Swift while healthy moving forward.
Yeah, I think both things can be true. That's a great note from Dwayne, and it may well be true, but also who cares? Because in this rushing ecosystem, especially when you get a favorable matchup, and Tampa is not necessarily a favorable matchup, but they're going to win the battle in the trenches almost every single time.
And they can get more targets. I know Hurts doesn't throw a lot, but Swift has upside there too, man. I mean, he legitimately finished as a top fantasy back any given week.
Number 31, Miami Dolphins, offensive EPA per play rankings. The Dolphins are first at 0.39. The 49ers are second all the way down at 0.16. I mean, the Dolphins offense right now is just ridiculous. I don't know. I don't have like a take here. It's just, my God, this offense, like what we're watching right now, might truly be like special historic stuff.
Yeah, Tua is the man. So much motion, lapping the field in pre-snap motion. And I just want to point out that they got 700 plus yards, 70 points last week without Jalen Waddle. I mean, just super impressive. This
dude,
Dolphins
they hadn't even really
offense.
gotten Waddle going before that. Like he'd had a couple quiet weeks. His usage wasn't great. Like they haven't even gotten him fully unleashed yet.
Yeah, and speaking of being jealous, I don't have much of Achane because I love my guy Mostert, but a 31-year-old and Wilson's health, I mean, that just screams league winner all over Achane.
Speaking of jealous, Dalton dunked all over me with the Tua takes in the preseason too. I think we can officially call that in favor of you as well.
Yeah, you were skeptical of this offense. It hasn't quite gone as well as your call of the Broncos last year with this, but the running was what you were saying. I say that seriously, dude. I mean, I took it serious when you said that. And again, they need to stay healthy. I mean, Mike White's not going to replicate this, but the running, is that shocked you? Because that's what you were skeptical of. And this is just gone from, 0 to 100.
Yeah, I said that the thing they needed to develop a really good run game, like as a counterpunch to their pass game. They couldn't just roll out what they did last year. And honestly, I should have just been like, Mike McDaniel, you are, bow down to the king there. Like I should have just left no doubts to our king, Mike McDaniel. He would figure this thing out. That should have been what I really said. Like, yeah, I have these concerns, I have these skepticism, but who gives a damn? Because Mike McDaniel's going to figure it out. He knows ball.
Everyone said Tua's 8.9 YPA is going to regress. Dude's at 10.1 so far this year, just out of control.
It's out of control, man. All right, number 32, your San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy ranks 5th in off-target throw rate, which is good, like 5th best. So not off-target very often. He trails only Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson. People, like, as soon as Purdy started to struggle on Thursday night, a little bit early, and look, he has the easiest gig in the NFL being the trigger man of that offense. I get it. But people were ready to kind of send the wolves out on Purdy. And I mean, look, he still is playing fine at this point to me.
Yeah, he's missed some throws the last 2 weeks. They still continue to win, and he has 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions since taking over Week 13 last year. But yeah, no, he's had some moments where he's missed some throws lately. And this week, the Arizona team is going to come to play, and Deebo Samuel has missed practice dealing with that rib injury. Ayuk still dealing with that shoulder injury. So I don't know. Again, I expect this game to be competitive, but Purdy, Purdy, fantasy-wise, they run the ball a lot, and their defense is good. So he's not, going to have a ceiling higher than top 10 any week, but man, he continues to just get multiple TDs in, week out.
Yeah, I think he's been really solid this year. Like, again, there's plays he wants to have back. There's plays everybody wants to have back. All right, let's move to Thursday Night Football. This is a really interesting game. Little disclaimer, we're taping this podcast just a little bit earlier than we would have, and there are a lot of injury questions in this game, so keep that in mind as you listen to what we're about to say. But right now, what we know, it seems like Aaron Jones and Christian Watson are going to return for the Green Bay Packers. And I think that's important. For my Packers stat, Dalton, we have Jordan Love ranked 2nd in turnover-worthy throw rate behind only Sam Howell, but he still ranks number 1 in EPA per dropback. I would say that Jordan Love, it hasn't been perfect, but he's about to get his 2 most explosive players back. And I think the things that he's missing on right now are mostly mechanical and can be corrected with more experience, just out there playing on the field.
Love's having a wild season. First of all, he deserves a ton of credit for what he's doing, replacing Aaron Rodgers without Christian Watson and mostly without Aaron Jones. But man, he entered last week leading the NFL in passer rating, but was behind only Justin Fields and Next Gen's completion percentage above expectation. finished Sunday's game with a bad number there, yet earned 20-plus fantasy points for the third straight game. He's running. He's being asked to throw the ball deep. He's number one in average depth of target, too. And
yeah,
again,
he's shooting it downfield.
And he hasn't had Watson, so it's all more positive for Love, who's been one of the best Superflex fantasy picks of the year. And then this week, by the way, the Lions' opponents have the third highest pass rate over expectation this season, so it's a really nice setup for Thursday night.
Yeah, that bleeds into my Lions stat here. And again, injury-wise, we think David Montgomery's going to play, or at least Dan Campbell thinks, but we don't know that as of the time we're taping this. But my Lions stat has to do with the defense here. The Lions rank 8th in rushing success rate allowed, but 20th in dropback success rate allowed. Aiden Hutchinson's been really good so far this year, but they have injuries in the secondary after trying to beef that unit up. But their run defense has been really solid. Like, they shut down Atlanta. Like, they plugged those holes, man. That was a really impressive performance that said something to me. And even the Seahawks tried to establish Kenneth Walker against the Lions early in week 2.
Yeah,
and that was it was going nowhere, man. So I think we might be needing to adjust expectations on the Lions defense, where from a rushing perspective, they're getting to be legit good, even though from a pass perspective they're not. So maybe this becomes a little like Diet Coke Tennessee Titans, where you can't run on them, but you can throw on them a little bit.
Yeah, Detroit, the new pass funnel, good for Jordan Love. Luke Musgrave's been close to having bigger games. I like him moving forward. Jaden Reed had a weird half, shut out the first half, a couple bad drops, but then some really nice catches. Watson, nice setup if he does return against this Lions secondary with the way they've been defending the run as well. Jared Goff, we need him to be up for the task to put up some points too on the other side, and of course he usually does not perform as well outdoors, but he's been playing very solid.
Yeah, Goff is just playing pretty good football right now. I think he's leveled off to being a pretty good quarterback. I don't know. This offense is fun in Detroit. They use Amon-Ra St. Brown in such fun ways. I think they trusted Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more than I expected last week. So if David Montgomery does return, what are your expectations for that backfield?
I'd like more targets for Gibbs. They ran him up the middle a ton. They basically just used him like Montgomery. It was weird. Not much
surprising.
Craig Reynolds, but we'll see. I would expect more of this as we saw week 1 with Montgomery replacing those carries up the middle and maybe more targets for Gibbs. We need to get him out in space more, but it was nice to see St. Brown play through that toe injury. I was really concerned there. And then Sam Laporta, who Andy just kept dissing all preseason. What a beast. I mean, it just completely destroying learning curve models for tight ends. I mean, what is he doing? Just out of control. Very impressive start for Laporta.
Yeah, Laporta has been unbelievably good.
Curve models. Sorry, I said learning age curve models for the. Because rookie tight ends aren't supposed to do this.
No, I mean, hey, that's a learning curve model too.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be about the learning curve. So, he's been incredible. I don't know. So just last thing, Christian Watson. Obviously, I think if Aaron Jones plays, you're playing him, even though this matchup is tough. They just got to get more out of him than they've been getting out of AJ Dillon. What about Christian Watson? If he plays, I don't know, where you think you'll rank him wide receiver wise?
Probably it'll be top 30-ish, I would say, assuming he's good to go. Top 30 for this. You're looking at the wide receivers there with this matchup, with especially the marriage here could be really nice with Love throwing the ball downfield and where Watson runs his route. So, I'm starting him as a borderline wide receiver 2 right away if he's active.
Lions opened up as 1.5-point road favorites. I think I kind of like the Packers there, getting a 1.5. I think they could straight up win this game. That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect on that one. I took Packers. Good times, Harmon.
That's a beautiful note of harmony to end the podcast on, despite you bringing back some old takes that I regret painfully.
Apologies. Believe me, I've gotten more wrong than you, I'm sure.
I deserve the shade for the Mike Evans thing and the Mike McDaniel stuff. I mean, I should have been nicer to the Mikes this year. That I do regret very deeply. So you are correct to shame me for that. But that is going to do it for us today, folks. Appreciate it. As always, you now have the stats that you need to know heading into week number 4. Tomorrow, we fully set the stage for week 4 with the binge stream skip preview. Dan Titus coming back for a second appearance on that one. Until then, we're out.